For this drawing, we are going to need 3 different types of charcoal. We need vine charcoal, which is this charcoal here. It is not as permanent. Compressed charcoal, which is much more permanent and harder to erase. And then I also have a compressed charcoal pencil that I will be using. For this drawing, I'm going to be using the image that you see on the lower left-hand corner. I'm going to start by just taking a pencil and putting in the basic outline of the mountains. I'm not doing anything with my trees yet. I just want to get an idea of where those mountains go. Once I have that outline in pencil, I'm going to go ahead and take my vine charcoal and I lay it on its side and I'm going to add some value into the mountains that are the furthest away from me. So I'm starting with the furthest mountains and then slowly working towards the mountains that are the closest, so I don't smudge the work that I just did. You'll notice when you work with fine charcoal that you can almost wipe all of it away after you draw with it, so you have to be super careful with how much you wipe away. You just want to be aware that it'll almost erase it completely just by taking your hand and smudging it. So, just be careful as you work with that. And also, when we're finished, I'm going to need to spray my entire drawing with what's called fixative, and that's going to hold the charcoal onto the paper. So here I am, I'm continuing my drawing using the side of my compressed charcoal, and I'm just continuing to add value to the mountains that are now closer to me. As I work, the mountains are going to get a little bit more detailed as I get to the closer mountains and cliffs. They're also going to get darker. Notice how I add the value to the top of the mountains and then just try to blend that down to create the illusion of those clouds that we see in the photograph. Now that I'm working on these mountains, I'm going to really try to create that illusion that these are cliffs. So I'm using my pencil to create those cliff lines that kind of run down. And I really want to make sure that I'm drawing with my charcoal in the right direction, which is up and down. So I create those ridges so it looks like a cliff and less like a mountain. And again, I'm going to smear the bottom only just because I want to create the illusion that it's kind of disappearing into the clouds. And as I work, you'll notice I'm continually using my eraser to keep my white space white. It's going to be really important that I don't get any compressed charcoal in those areas because it will be nearly impossible to erase. Once I have the vine charcoal the way I want it, I'm going to grab my compressed charcoal pencil and just add a few little areas of really dark black to that cliff. I want this cliff to start looking a little bit more detailed and a little more textured because it's closer to me. Once you're ready, you can go ahead and take your vine charcoal and fill in that whole cliff in the foreground. And I use vine charcoal first always because it's easier to erase. And then once I have things the way that I like it, I'll go back with compressed charcoal and add the details. Okay, and once I have that space filled in with vine charcoal, I'm actually ready to take my compressed charcoal stick and add some extra details. So I'm going to take that and just kind of pick some spots of the cliff to emphasize, especially the tops. And then I want to also make it look like there are lines jutting out because it's a cliff and it's a rock. So I'll do that by just taking my compressed charcoal and drawing in some of those line details to create that texture. I want this cliff to be fairly dark, so you want to use quite a bit of compressed charcoal for this part. And now that I have my rocks and ridges all drawn in, I'm ready to actually start with the tree. So for this, I'm going to use my compressed charcoal pencil because I want to get nice clean lines. And I'll go ahead and start with the trunk of the tree and fill that in, and then I'll add some of the leaves and branches later. And what I'm really focusing on when I'm drawing in some of these leaves is trying to create that texture. So I'm using lots of lines and squiggles, but I also want to notice where are the branches darker and create like a cluster of leaves. So I'm going to use lots and lots of lines to create that texture in my tree. And then I also want you to notice that there are other trees on this cliff. There's a few trees and branches kind of jutting out. And if you look very closely, you can see them even inside the rocks. So I want to just take a second and add some of those branches and leaves and to create that texture. There's also a few smaller ones at the top of the mountain as well. So I'm just going to take a minute, continuing with my squiggly lines for the leaves, and just add that texture into the cliff. By adding lots of texture and details into this cliff, what I'm creating is the illusion of space and depth, because anything that we're closer to, we can actually see more of the details, whereas if it's farther away, we see less of those details. And so an artist really wants to be aware of that when they're drawing, especially a landscape, because I want to create that space. And I can do that by creating lots of texture with this cliff and with some of these trees and branches. All right, finishing up a charcoal drawing, it's super important to make sure that you take your eraser and clean up any white areas and any smudges. Charcoal is very messy, and so it's very easy to get those. And then also when I'm finished, I want to make sure I spray my paper with fixative. Fixative is kind of like a glue, I guess, and what it does is it holds that charcoal to the paper a little bit better so it won't smear as badly. If you're in a pinch and you're working from home, you can actually even just use hairspray. That works as well. Alrighty, we're all finished. This is my finished drawing. Thank you so much for watching this video with me today. I hope that you learned a little bit more about the different types of charcoal and some techniques that you can use in your own charcoal drawings.